Today, we are hearing from PLAID CYMRU candidate Kiera Marshall, who is one of the young candidates standing in this election. Now, surprisingly, there are quite a few young candidates standing across the political spectrum on this occasion, something that we've not seen to this extent in previous elections. It's important to point out that progress has already been made in terms of the representation in the Senedd, particularly when it comes to younger Senedd members, with some good examples being people like, obviously, Jack Sargent, Sam Kurtz, Tom Gifford, and of course Luke Fletcher, who was the youngest Senedd member in the last Senedd term. And so progress has undoubtedly been made, but I, for one, was really surprised to see so many young candidates standing for pretty much all the parties, with PLAID, Labour, Reform, Conservative and Green all being able to boast young candidates in their midst. And now I'm saying that, I suspect that the Liberal Democrats also have young candidates too. So it seems as if that is definitely an improvement that has been made, and Kiera Marshall is just one great example of that. So without further ado, let's get into the interview with Kiera Marshall. Welcome to Wales in Context, the podcast exploring the stories shaping modern Wales. Each episode, we take a closer look at the politics, policies, and decisions that affect people across the country, breaking down complex issues and placing them in the wider Welsh and global context. From the Senedd to communities on the ground, we speak to the people who know the issues best. I'm your host, Keisha Page, and this is Wales in Context.
My name is Kiera Marshall and I'm a PLAID CYMRU candidate in Caerdydd. I'm second on the list.
And you're obviously a young candidate.
I am.
How
it was
exciting.
My 28th birthday yesterday.
No
so
way.
yeah.
So would you? I'm sure you'd be one of the youngest, wouldn't you? If you're.
Yeah, I think there's a few of us. So like me, Zainab Akbar, who's in the Caerdydd Ffynnon Taf constituency for us, and then Niamh Salkeld. Zainab's slightly older, Niamh is slightly younger. But we're all basically that sort of age group.
That's brilliant. You know, I've been active in politics for a while now, and seeing so many young, and particularly young women as well, getting elected or could possibly be even put on the list as an achievement in itself compared to years gone by. It's really exciting. Yeah,
it was. I felt quite supported by the party in terms of the gender quotas. I think that did help us, and it shows that, you know, that they're supporting us to be on the list and that they want us to be there, and we're not sort of just being irritating trying to get involved. Also, yeah, I don't think it's needed, because even when I go canvassing, we do get lots of young people coming out at the minute, but it is largely young men. So there is something about how we engage young women in politics, and I think the quotas have helped with that.
Obviously, young women have a unique experience of life. It is different to young men, and so having that representation is vital with policy debates and things, isn't it?
Yeah, and it should be interesting just to see how that changes debate in the Senedd. Not only are we going to have more women there, but of a different age group as well, and is that going to alter how it looks and the conversations that are happening and the focus? So hopefully they will.
And it's interesting, it goes alongside Votes for 16 as well, doesn't it? So hopefully those people feel slightly more represented now as well, and potentially they see a pathway for themselves as well in the future.
Yeah, that was one thing that I really wanted to do as well, which was part of where I was standing, was to make sure that, you know, people can see themselves in their politicians, and that engages young people in politics. I think, you know, it's not the most exciting thing for someone who's 16, 17, 18 to see like a 50-year-old man in the suit. And yes, these people do also deserve a place and representation in our Senedd, but we just need to make sure that it engages everyone and like has that wide spectrum of voices from across Wales. And I think that has been missing. So hopefully, as we get more young people coming in after this election, we'll see people engaging more from a younger age in Welsh politics.
So when did you first get involved with politics, and what was it that inspired you?
It's hard with this question, because it's sort of like it's like a strange patchwork journey. So the first election I ever voted in was the EU Brexit referendum, and that was like a series of elections I voted in that wouldn't go my way. And then I got involved with the party leafleting when I was about 16, 17 a little bit. My mum was sort of involved. And then I volunteered with Bethan, Said and Jenkins for a little bit. Well, I did a year out and I was waitressing. I then went to university. I studied economics and I was president of the Welsh SOC there, and I got people to come in and speak to us from Welsh politics, including with PLAID. So it just it just accumulated, and then I worked for the party on economic policy, then I stood for the party in the general election in 2024, and now I'm here again in 2026. But yeah, it was just little things really, and now it's essentially my everyday life.
I think that's a really reflective story, because I think a lot of people think there's this big moment when you join, but like for me, when I joined the party, I used to be a member. I joined, but I don't think I became active for like 2 years after, and it is like a piecemeal effect, isn't it? You kind of dip your toe in and then realise, oh, I quite like this.
And I think the thing that really, that clicked for me when I was like, oh no, I do really want to be involved with this party and I do really believe in this, was Beth and Sai came into my college to talk about politics essentially, and she was talking about the monarchy and talking about Welsh independence, and I was like, oh, these are things I'd been thinking and I'd been seeing from PLAID, but just seeing her as a young woman come in and talk to us and be so open at that age, and it just inspired me essentially, and I was like, oh, I could do that, and I'd maybe like to get into this sort of career as well, and hopefully then people will see me talk to them and maybe feel the same way and get involved.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's a really good kind of motivation as well. I'm hoping to get Beth on here at some point as well, because I love how unapologetically outspoken she is about things that matter, but we just don't see addressed in like the mainstream sort of media. So how is the campaign going first? Let's start with that.
Yeah, it's going really well. It's going really positive. It's definitely crunch time now, and it's very hectic and busy where every day there's a lot going on, but it's going really well. I'm enjoying it as well, which is important.
And obviously the poll came out last night, so what are your feelings on that?
But it's scary to me. I just had a baby, and I think of what her future looks like in a reform Wales, and like what that looks like for the children she's going to grow up with, and the children who already live in poverty in Wales, and is that going to be exacerbated by reform, and what's going to happen to our NHS that's already on its knees. There's so many questions that I don't think we know. Well, I'd say we do know that there could be dangerous outcomes with reform in power. So it's scary to me, and it does reinforce what we've been trying to say, that we are neck and neck with reform, if people want a progressive government, they are going to need to lend their vote to us on the 7th, because we're the only party that can stop that happening. But it's scary what those two very different futures look like.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think tactical voting is going to be increasingly important in this election, but obviously PLAID would argue that they should get the vote anyway.
I'd agree.
So go back to sort of young people then. Why do you think young people are underestimated, and how do you think young people are underestimated?
Well, I think part of the issue with young people perhaps not engaging with typical politics, that turning out to vote in elections, knocking on doors, is that we're not giving people the tools they need to actually engage with politics. I think there's a real gap with political education in schools that should be completely politically party neutral, but it needs to explain how devolution works and how the voting systems work, and just to give people that education. But I think young people interact with politics in a different way at the minute as well, whether that's online, and they'll be having conversations that are political, but that perhaps that link between how that fits into a wider system that they've not been educated on isn't quite there yet. But I'm hoping that this election, when there's such a stark choice, and we have always had Labour leading the government here, that might change how young people are engaging. We saw it in Caerphilly, and hopefully we will see that pattern emerge again with turnout on the 7th of May.
That's really funny you said that about political education, because that's what I was saying earlier, that's one of the things I'm really passionate about. Yeah. I think there was, in my opinion, a missed opportunity to bring in political education with votes for 16. It's like giving someone the licence to the car but never actually giving them the car to actually learn how to drive. Do you think that was a missed opportunity?
100%. And I think it seems to be a topic of conversation in the Senate for the last 5 years has been political education, but it hasn't cut through into actually giving that to our young people, and that's a generation of 5 years. That's a whole school group that's gone without it. I hope, I'd like to push for that if I get elected, to try and actually make that meaningful. And it's not just young people as well, older people, I knock on doors, they don't understand the system, they don't know it's happening. The awareness campaign that needed to happen hasn't seemed to happen. So how are we expecting young people to vote for the first time if even people who voted for years can't figure it out? And there's, that gap is worrying. It disenfranchises people.
traditionally it's always been trade unions that has kind of politicised people, particularly in like the South Wales valleys and things like that. And obviously that's not, the membership of those trade unions isn't there anymore. So we're potentially creating a cycle, I suppose, of these young people now ending up the older people eventually that don't know.
And the only people that will vote are those who are privileged or have that social knowledge passed down to them from in their family, which isn't how democracy can't function like that.
And we continue keeping the people who need representation. I had to think about that as well as like people like yourself. How do we not risk losing those young people in politics as well if we don't actually give them those tools to get themselves?
This is why we're trying to use social media a lot. Short form video, I think, is such a way to cut through into sort of this, young people who are quite hard to reach groups sometimes and hard to get into in other ways. And I think that's also why seeing a young person on your phone is just slightly more engaging to actually try and bring you into politics and not just scroll straight past it.
Yeah, I agree. And actually that brings something else I was going to mention is how good your social media account has been. I think you and PLAID have been brilliant at social this election, and so obviously you think that's important, but is that why you think it's important for people to see yourself in young people?
I think it adds to the whole campaign. They say something, isn't it, like you need 5 hits. Like it's about trying to catch someone on a door. Maybe they see something on their social media, then they get a leaflet, and it's making sure you're not just having one conversation. You're engaging with people multiple times over. And I think social media is like an invaluable tool for adding to that and making those conversations happen with people. And also, people are curious. They've just got it all on their phone. Everything they want to see about you or what you're talking about, what your priorities are, is so easily accessible. But I think for young people, that is what they're using. We are more on our phones, and that's how we need to engage people where they are. And there's still space for classic media as well. Like newspapers, press release, that sort of thing. But again, we've always been doing that. This is a new form of media, and we need to make sure that we are targeting it towards the groups that are on there. Yeah,
I agree. I think there can be some kind of scarcity feeling towards the media, but actually it's different audiences, different content for all different audiences.
Yeah.
And I think that's obviously an important part of this election.
Yeah.
In a way that it has been before, but maybe not as much as it.
And
especially with misinformation as well.
Yes, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's like trying to correct what people might be seeing elsewhere on social media. I think with platforms like X as well, I go in 2 minds about whether it's moral to be on there, but then what do you leave on it if you leave it, and who's seeing that? And I still I go back and forth on it. I think there is like a duty to try and counter misinformation on there, even though there's questions about whether you should be on the platform at all.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one, actually. And you're right, because you do risk leaving an echo chamber otherwise. So what are your priorities then for if you get elected? Just say it's May the 8th and you're there.
Yeah.
What are your priorities?
The whole reason I sort of got into politics was I grew up in a council estate in Swansea, and that was sort of during Tory austerity with my teenage years. And then I went to study at the London School of Economics, and I sort of became, I was already aware of the sort of my area being stigmatised or spoken about in school differently to where the people were from. And I think that then became very acute to me in university, the difference between myself and other people studying there, and this level of wealth inequality between me and my peers in London and Wales, and it just all solidified for me. So I think poverty, anti-poverty measures are really important to me, and trying to tackle that wealth inequality in Wales. But then within that as well, my area, growing up, we didn't have people come and canvass on our doors. It was very left behind. Even my own party didn't go there. So I want to make sure that I'm going into communities that perhaps we haven't been that present in the constituency before, that we're a party for all of Wales, and most importantly, that politics actually works for the people who need it most. And that's sort of, I want to do that community engagement, and I want to go to disadvantaged areas, and I want to try and at least uplift people and try and make futures a bit brighter from my personal experience, I guess.
That's really important. I think from a personal kind of side of things, I had that as well growing up. I'm from the Rhondda, so when I went to Aberdeen to school though, and it was always all from the Rhondda, and so I completely relate to that. And I think as you get older, you definitely feel more of a pride about where you come from.
Yes.
And is that part of your hope as well, that maybe people can see what you're doing and think maybe that they can potentially make change?
Yeah, exactly. And I think people ideally need to, people should represent their own communities, and we know that the Senedd is very middle class, and I think perhaps seeing that you can come from a council estate, or you can come from a more working class background, will hopefully inspire others to do the same. And actually we should be making policy based on lived experience, not just political theory. There's again, a place for both, but I think it's too heavily weighted in one direction at the minute.
Yeah, especially with the demographics of obviously Wales being more working class.
Yeah.
So it's really powerful. So obviously you've said what your priorities are. How important do you think that the 100-day plan is for Plaid Cymru, and what would you say about that?
I think it was really important for just showing that we're serious about governing. Like, we're ready to come in from day one, and we have a plan for what we want to do. And it's it wasn't the manifesto. It was just to show that we are serious about this, and if you put your trust in us, we've put a lot of thought into how we can make Wales better, how we can stand up for Wales. And I think that's what that plan was. It's just sort of laying out what that initial few days needs to look like to get going as soon as hopefully we get elected.
You did mention earlier with the awareness campaigns, but talking about the changes for the election, obviously there's so many changes happening. And one of the most visible ones I noticed on the way, and I hadn't noticed it before obviously, is the placards have changed, haven't they? They no longer have the name of the candidate on them.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it on the way, and I was thinking that's probably one of the most obvious visuals of that change. Yeah. How well do you think that has been communicated from your door knocking, and do you think it's still a bit of an issue?
It is an issue. We're still, not even from the door knocking. So I've got a placard outside my house. Me and my partner were leaving the house the other day, and a guy comes along and he's like, who are these? What is this? Why has everyone got these signs up outside their house? And then we were explaining it to him, and he didn't know there was an election on. He didn't, let alone who the parties were. The level of political engagement we're facing is political lack of engagement we're facing is huge. But then from door knocking, people don't know that it's not just one candidate. They might ask who they're voting for, and we explain it. But what we've been trying to do in our door knocking is we actually do ask that question, is, do you know the system's changing? And then trying to explain it to them. We've got a leaflet with multiple candidates on, so we can point and explain, these are your candidates, this is how it works, it's a PR system. But I'm quite disappointed in many ways that there wasn't some sort of, I know the Senedd sent out a leaflet to every household. I don't think it's enough. My nan saw something on the telly more recently. I think we've failed people essentially in the awareness of this.
It's almost as if it's complicated in some ways, but it's in voter facing it's quite a simplified sort of system.
And I don't think it's too hard to explain. Like on the doors, I just say the percentage of the vote will be the percentage of the seats people get. You get one vote, and that's how it's worked out. So with some nuances, you get 30% of the vote, you'd hope for around 30% of the seats, with some caveats to that. But it's not too difficult to explain. You can go into more detail with the minimums and so on if you want, but the principle is there, and it takes a matter of seconds, but we're just not.
It's almost like we've overcomplicated the explaining part of it. There's like a fear of overwhelming people, so there's been no explaining at all. And actually, it is fairly simple to explain in terms of the voters facing part of it. But I hope that's just, there's a fear that that's going to overwhelm people, because when they see the ballot, the ballot's going to look so different.
And what I thought was interesting about the ballot? They don't put the addresses of the candidates. So previously, you'd know the candidate lives in the constituency. Yeah. And I've seen some of the postal votes, and that's not the case, which I think is interesting, because a lot of people, that is something that matters to them. I know when I stood in the general election in 2024, there was quite a notable case of where we had a parachute candidate who'd lived in Walthamstow and came in, and people were furious about it. And actually, that change alone doesn't give people the full picture, I think.
So to touch on that, actually, the parachute of candidates, obviously you touched on why it's important for you from where you've come from, but how important do you think that is to PLAID, that PLAID selected mostly local candidates, as far as I'm aware, all local candidates, and so there is that hands-on experience in terms of policy and just representation as well.
I just think we're the party that's picked the most candidates who live in the constituency. Out of all of them standing in the Senedd election at the minute. It's something it is really, really important to me. But I think I question the integrity of someone who would want to stand for somewhere where they've never lived and have no connection to, because it's at that point this is just a job to you. And to me, I don't think the role of an elected representative is just a job. It encompasses actually some sort of community engagement and representation things that shouldn't just be a career path. And so I think that's what concerns me, and I think that's why people find it so abhorrent. It is many elections across the UK when you get parachute candidates, people often reject it. So, yeah, I think it is important to us, and we are the party of Wales, and that's in our ethos that we're going to stand up for Wales, and within that is a form of localism, isn't it? And it's a form of wanting to sort of represent Welsh communities and be Wales focused. So it wouldn't fit with our whole thing to then try and not represent our communities and not represent Wales properly by just allowing people to be career politicians.
Yeah, it's really important. I think you've hit on something really interesting there. There are people who see politics as a career that they can just kind of make their way to Prime Minister or whatever it is. But actually, it's more of a vocation, isn't it? 'Cause it's completely full time.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, it doesn't seem as if Senate members ever get any time off when they're in their constituencies.
Yeah.
But obviously, that's a benefit for the Senate is how much time they do get to spend in their constituencies because it is more local. And I was speaking with Luke earlier, and obviously we were saying about one of the most, in my opinion, one of the big misrepresentations is people don't realise how everyday the Senate is in terms of the impact. Is that something that you would try to communicate to people, how it does affect things that we have, that we experience every day, health, education?
Yeah.
Do you think that's a myth?
Yeah, no, that 100% does cut through. I don't think people realise what is and isn't devolved and how much control the Welsh Government does have over certain things. But yeah, I think hopefully maybe with the change in government, people might notice that a bit more. Because we've had Labour leading government for so long, that is maybe been quite consistent. They've not noticed any sudden policy changes and they don't know where that comes from. So maybe that would help to sort of counter that lack of awareness. But yeah, I hope with political education we start to counter that as well. But I definitely say it is an issue.
Yeah, that's really. So, what would you think in the same tone? Do you think there's any misconceptions about PLAID?
I do get it on the doors sometimes. I had someone say that him and his wife wanted to vote for us, and his wife was a bit worried that it would mean that all the road signs would change to Welsh and she wouldn't be able to understand anything or something. And I was like, I promise you that's not the case. Look at the manifesto. Of course, we want to support our young people to actually have the language, but that's not going to be by erasing every inch of English around the country. And for me, I've got friends back home who do struggle with it as well. I didn't have the Welsh language growing up. It's something I've learned over the last 5 years or so, and I'm still getting there. But I've got friends who do struggle with that, who are going to vote PLAID, but they do still struggle with that identity issue or thinking that it's not for them. And that's even with one of their friends actually standing for the party. So I think there's a lot to be done to counter that and show that this is for everyone who calls Wales home and who wants to see Wales do better. But I think it's such an interesting thing with the language, again, being a learner, is that people who are sometimes maybe more opposed to the Welsh language talk about this idea of choice and that they want to choose whether they speak Welsh, which, that's fine. But unless you give children bilingualism, the ability to speak Welsh, then they don't actually have a choice, do they? Because I didn't get a choice. I could only speak English, so I didn't get to choose not to speak Welsh. So I think, we need to give people actually that choice to be bilingual and then choose what a language they want to operate in. And there's also something about the right of people to be able to live through Welsh and have that choice as well, to be able to go into their shop and to have that person reply to them in Welsh is equally important as someone to have the choice to live in English. And I think that's currently not quite in the conversation at the minute.
Yeah, interesting kind of antidote to that. So I recently interviewed for my True Crime podcast Michael O'Brien, who is one of the newsagents so he was wrongly convicted, and he told me a really interesting story that I'd never thought about. And that was that when he was in prison, one thing he noticed was that if there was someone who wanted anything in the Welsh language, their letters would be like 3 weeks late because they had to be translated, and it wouldn't just be it'd be sent off, and I hadn't thought about the impact that actually people who do, there's this perception that actually for those people who've got it wrong, PLAID would penalise the people who don't speak English, but actually it's people who speak Welsh who often feel that kind of...
Yeah, I went on a Welsh course to Nagrythaim, which is like a residential Welsh learning centre, and there was a woman talking there, one of the tutors, about her friend who was having mental health problems, and she just wanted to see a doctor as soon as possible. So she said, I don't care if they speak English or Welsh, and she was going to see this doctor and then this counsellor and through a medium of English, and it wasn't really helping. And then she was like, oh, maybe I'll try through Welsh Medium, which is her first language. And she said it instantly started helping more without having to translate everything in her head and not being able to express herself properly in her second language. It was actually preventing her ability to really utilise that counselling, which is, I would never have thought about that as someone who's monolingual. I just live so easily in one language. You don't think about actually people having to translate in their head. And I just think it's a shame that we've made this something that's divisive rather than something that actually could bring people together.
I think there was a study done as well a couple of years ago. I can't off the top of my head remember the name of it, but it actually showed that people who spoke Welsh had better mental health overall as well. I'm guessing it's because of the community, how important it is, particularly in places like North Wales where they do predominantly speak that, and I think it is a community feeling to the language there.
We're trying to raise, I've got a 7-month-old, we're trying to raise her first language Welsh, which is hard for me in the house, but it's getting there. But my partner, his first language, so I forgot what I was going to say on that. There was some sort of point to it. Oh, this is the thing. Bilingualism is so much easier to then learn another language as well. Because I tried to do German in school, I tried to do Spanish, and I just can't have it. And there's my partner, he's like picked up bits of Italian, bits of French so easily. So I think that's a gift to give someone bilingualism at an early age, because then multilingualism, it will become so much easier, and especially in a more globalised world as well.
It's something Europe have done right, hasn't it? Where they've prioritised multilingualism, and so they do. You find, don't you? One of them, they don't just speak German; they speak Italian, French, and they were impressive. And when you, like you said, with globalism, you think the fact that we've not prioritised that with our own language as well is really. And
I'm one of these people as well. And I cringe at myself when I go on holiday, and I can't even remember like the basics, like hello and thank you, and it's so embarrassing and so typical as well of what people think people from the UK are like when they're abroad. So I just, hopefully she won't be like that when she's older. She'll actually be able to pick up languages.
Having a partner that speaks Welsh helped you with your learning? Because I always think that's, with me, I've always thought about learning Welsh, and then I think I haven't got anyone actively to speak it with. Has that helped you happy?
Yeah, I find it so I was learning before we got together, and so I like to say this. I didn't start learning because of him. I wanted to anyway. But I actually felt like embarrassed to speak Welsh for a bit. I thought everyone knows I can speak English. Why would I even bother trying to swap to Welsh with them? I'm so not good at it. Why would I bother? And then even with him in the house, unless I had a few drinks, I wouldn't speak it with him. I was so embarrassed. I was having the baby that changed it, because one, she can't judge me, and two, I'm like reading children's level books with her in Welsh, so it's just so much easier. And through that, my ability to speak Welsh has massively increased. I do think not having the ability to use it does slow people's ability to learn. For me, it was actually my own like embarrassing, like cringing at myself that stopped me from using it with him.
So just moving on to kind of culture, because it's something I haven't spoken about with the other candidates that I thought would be quite interesting. We've seen a lot more Welsh dramas, Welsh characters in TV shows, things like that. Do you think that's really important for Wales on an international level, and is that side of culture something PLAID would really be encouraging?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm currently chair of PLAID Bank, the youth section in Plaid Cymru. And we ran a series of forums with our members all across Wales to see what they wanted to be in the manifesto. And one thing that they brought up was they wanted maybe like a second channel, so not just Espedirect, but another thing that's maybe aimed towards young people, that has a different style of content. Again, that representation of seeing people operate and be able to relate to characters who are Welsh. Because I think this is something that's missing on social media, is algorithms don't really like the Welsh language very much, or non-English language. So we're getting a generation of Welsh speakers who their entertainment is in English, and actually providing culture in Welsh to those people and then learners as well. I think it's really important.
That's really important, because I do see a lot of Welsh content now, but not Welsh language.
Yeah,
and obviously I'm not a Welsh speaker, so I wouldn't, but I hadn't thought that angle.
Yeah. Whenever I post something, and I'll post it, especially campaign material, I'll try and do bilingually, and if I do 2 separate posts, you'll always get more interaction on the English one than the Welsh one. I just think these platforms don't quite know where to push it or how to push it, and it doesn't pick up the words as easily, maybe.
Oh, that's interesting. Like platforms like TikTok, they do, don't they? They use the words. They're way too clever for me to explain. But.
Yeah, isn't it? But they do. They can actually tell what the content is about and who to push it to. So I think when it's in a minority language, that algorithm just doesn't quite push it as much.
That's true. But how important is that youth? I can never know how to say it. Is it PLAID Bank?
Yeah, PLAID Bank. Yeah.
How important is that to the party and to representing young people then overall?
Yeah, I think it's a good way of feeling, it's not the most entertaining thing in the world to say to go to a constituency meeting for 2 hours and talk about the minutes of the last meeting and so on. And I remember when I was first getting engaged with the party, I went to one in Swansea and I was like, oh, this isn't quite like what I'd like to be doing. So I think it gives people a different way to come into the party. We've got a huge WhatsApp group. We can talk about like the polls, for example, and you're talking about it with other young people, discussing it in different ways. And you can go leaflet in together as a group of young people and not feel maybe, like that it's such a scary thing to be doing. So I think it's a really good entry point into the party. There's loads of people now who are older in the party. I think of David Tristan in Caerdydd on Tab, top of the list, who's actually come in. He was through PLAID Bank and now he's here. It's just a good way to get into it. I've liked it to be more of a campaigning machine than we've managed to. Yeah, I only took it over sort of midway last year. And I'm trying to run my own campaign, so it's been a bit of a time constraint. I will be handing it over at some point. Yeah, and a 7-month-old. But yeah, it's a way in. It's a way in, I'd say. It is, yeah. It's chaos. It's house as well.
Oh no,
I know. We've got like bare plaster on the walls. It's just,
You can't wait for a break after all this.
Yeah, I know, then what's going to happen, isn't it?
Because one of the journalists keeps saying, I'll keep working hard now until the 7th of May and then I'll take some time off. And we're all like, do you not know what's going to happen after?
No, we got like a pack from the party about sort of what that first week might look like if you're elected. And I was like, oh, another week. In my head it's like just 2 weeks. No.
Because obviously it looks as if no party's going to win. Well, that's kind of impossible under the system. But so it's going to all be full of all negotiations and all that afterwards. So it's going to be interesting.
Ongoing, yeah.
So just to finish then, for anyone who is undecided, what would you say about why they should vote PLAID? And we're not trying to convert voters here. We know that doesn't very often happen. But if you were talking to people who are undecided, why should they give PLAID their trust for this election?
I think it's a few things. I think we've got a really comprehensive plan of how we want to change things for the better of Wales and how we want to refocus that over 5 priorities, which is getting people jobs. Again, if we're thinking about younger voters, we have the highest amount of people in Wales not in education, employment or training. We've got a plan to try and counter that. The waiting lists as well, it comes up again and again in the doors. That is one of our few priorities that we really want to hone in on, is tackling those waiting lists. Another one I mentioned, the child poverty issue. I think it's such like a stain on our society that so many children live in poverty. And I think Labour spent something like 7 billion on poverty reduction since 2022, and it's not worked. So I think it's about having a change, having a party that's going to focus on things like that Reform aren't going to, and whatever's happening at the minute isn't working. So it's the positive change that we need, which is why I suggest people look at our policies and how we're trying to tackle the issues that do matter to voters across Wales. We know voters in Wales tend to be more progressive, so we're in line with those values. And if they want to not have a reform government coming in on May 7th, and whatever that looks like, then to lend their vote to us, essentially.
Brilliant. Good luck for the election.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Wales in Context. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow the podcast and share it with someone interested in the future of Wales. All notes and resources from today's episode can be found in the show notes. You can also follow Wales in Context on TikTok, and if you'd like to support the podcast, please consider leaving a comment or a review. Thank you for listening. Diolch.